Okay.
Hi. Are we live?
Almost.
Okay. We're going to wait until we're live for those. Maybe you're watching now. Maybe you're not. This has been a real interesting situation.
Okay, let me just make sure that we're up on YouTube.
You guys are getting a real behind the scenes. This is BTS Modern Mystic. We're making sure that we are live on YouTube and Facebook, and we are recording an episode spontaneously of MoonDay Mystic because we were supposed to be interviewing Jessie Susannah, the Money Witch, but we're not sure what happened. so, so hopefully we will get to have this conversation with her sometime soon. But there was some sort of crossed wires. So instead of leaving everybody hanging, my producer Ariel, who's also a part of the broader team at Modern Mystic Shop, had some questions that they already had lined up from a past thing that we were doing, and we just decided we're going to do a Q&A. Modern Mystic Shop just hit its 7th year, and I guess these are questions that she and people on our team wanted to hear from me about. So we're going to do it, and hopefully it's entertaining or informative or whatever. Ariel, take it away.
All right. So, first question is
Yes.
how did you get started as a tarot reader?
Oh, that's a great question. I got started as a tarot reader when I was part of this group in Atlanta that I went to when I was in my mid to early 20s, trying to get help. Like basically, I was trying to, it was like self improvement kind of place. And they also did energy work, depth psychology, Buddhist studies, that kind of thing. And part of the tools that they taught us that they used was tarot. And so through their instruction is when I first was introduced to it as a tool of sort of self discovery and insight and intuition building. But I didn't really get into it at that point. I was struggling with the cards feeling like an intuitive integrated thing. It was like I was still using guidebooks. I wasn't really sure of myself. And the deck that they taught from didn't resonate with me. So that was really challenging. So then I would say, like, can't remember when, but like 2010, 2011, maybe it's 12, whenever The Wild Unknown came out, it was gifted to me. And that's when it clicked all together. Like I had already had a psychic awakening and all that stuff. So all that together made for a potent tarot recipe. But that's kind of how I got into it.
All right.
Does that
And the
answer?
second,
Yeah. Do you have a follow-up question, Ariel? About
I
tarot? No. Okay, great. Okay, keep going.
um,
We're just gonna read the list.
we're just gonna go right down it.
Okay.
What inspired you to open Modern Mystic Shop?
So when I was started doing tarot reading professionally at first, I was having people come into my home. And I was reading for them there, and that felt fine because they were mostly friends or friends of friends. And, it's like, hey, come over, chill out. But then as it started getting wider in the scope of the people that were basically strangers, I no longer wanted to invite people into my home for that service, but I still wanted to do readings. And at that time, I was doing something like 20 or 25 readings a week. So I rented this little loft space in Grant Park above a hair salon, and I started doing readings there. And I had, until very recently, it was the same triangle shelf that we had in the store in Atlanta. I had that on my wall, and I just had some, like little crystals and stuff I picked up in case my clients wanted it. But Modern Mystic Shop really started from a desire for me to provide tools that I would use for my clients without having to send them to sort of like dusty metaphysical stores that have been around for 30, 40 years. I noticed that my clientele didn't really seem to resonate, just like I don't, with some of those energies and images and that whole vibe. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could create a store that felt more like me and the people that I'm working with? And that's kind of, it was just like this little thought. And then well, as the story goes, I got into a deep, dark depression and I felt like I was really stuck. And I just had this idea of the store. And then Brandon taught me the road opener ritual that I did. And it wasn't to open the store, it was expansion. That was my prayer. I'm like, I'm so stuck. I need expansion, momentum, I need purpose. And then that's when everything blew open. And within a very short amount of time, I was hosting a little event in my little loft space, and we were sharing about our hopes. And I mentioned about the store, and a client that was in there approached me about helping me financially to get that dream open. And within a very short amount of time, we had our first little location opened. And that's that story. 7 years ago, as of 2 days ago. So it was,
Right.
yeah. And you know what, Ariel? I did not know that it would be what it became. I thought that I would be able to do tarot readings during the week, like a few days a week, and then on the weekends just sell crystals myself. I didn't think I would need a staff. It wasn't this big ambition. It was more like a desire to create a lifestyle for myself and basically create a job for myself that I liked. And then it very quickly turned into what we have now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Happy 7-year birthday to Modern
Thank
Mystic Shop.
you. Yeah. She's a Scorpio.
Scorpio Queen. That was going to be one of my questions actually is, do you know the shop's birth chart? We know she's the Scorpio sun.
I do. I'm trying to my memory wants to say, but this probably isn't right, that she's a triple Scorpio, but that seems like too crazy. So I don't know off the top of my head, but there was a time where I knew that information, and I have used the natal chart information for the business to strategize and to make plans and stuff like that. But she definitely has an energy and a personality that is palpable. And this isn't your question, but I'll just share this information anyway. During the pandemic, actually, I'm going to pause for 1 second. Ariel, could you mute like when you're not talking? So I'm hearing a squeak, and
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
that's okay. It's okay. I just don't want you to have to edit it afterwards. So everyone, this is really behind the scenes, but so see if I can pick up from where we left off. So this isn't a question that you asked, but now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, the Scorpio, the sun, the chart of the store. Oh, okay. This isn't a question that you asked, but during the pandemic, um, when everything was closed, I was still had permissions to go into the store. And I would go in there very like once a week or a couple times a week just to sit in there because I could feel like the store was lonely, and it just felt like this stagnancy that she wasn't used to. And we used to have this like chair that my sister gave me for my apartment that was sitting in the store. I was sitting in that chair, and it was the first time that I heard, because I have like this clairaudience, heard the store or Modern Mystic talk to me. And this was in the heat of the pandemic where like no one was working and we had no idea. And she said, "This place will be full of people again more than ever before. Like, don't worry about it." And it was like she was consoling me during this like sad time for the store of the pandemic. And wouldn't you know, that's what happened after we reopened and things started opening up again. We had more people in there for the year after the pandemic than ever before. And so anyway, I think I should probably check in with her more, see how she's feeling. Because she
Yeah.
spoke. It's like, okay, girl.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your practice?
Oh, now you're muted for real.
Oh,
Yeah.
what about now?
I can hear you. What's the next question?
The next question is, I was going to say, are you open to talking about your practice a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what it is today or what it has been or
Just all over the place.
all over the place. Okay.
What
I've
what tarot spread do you use most when you read for yourself?
always mind, body, spirit. It's my favorite thing. I teach it, I preach it. I just think mind, body, spirit is such a good check-in and snapshot of what's going on multiple levels. And then with spirit, I kind of lump in like emotional and spiritual kind of in the same position. And so I use it before I read for any person. Every topic they ask me, I'm like, what is this? What is the landscape of this person and the diverse areas that which they occupy? Um, my practice has changed throughout the years, thinking back to that. And I'm in this weird gap period that I've discussed with you a little bit where some of my old practices seem to be closing and new practices seem to be opening. And what I wanted to mention, now you're reminding me, is I took a workshop yesterday with Kim Kranz, who has been interviewed on the show, and it was called The Mystic's Mind. And part of what we were studying there is these opposites that as a mystic we have to hold, and not hold in like in opposition and tension always, but it's like my tattoo. We were using this like infinity sign, and how we can take our mind from like one to the other without making one better than the other or whatever. And the reason why I'm saying this is because she gave us a long list that we could choose from, like 50 opposites. And the one that stuck with me was sunrise and sunset. And that was really interesting to work with because it was most of them were like, dark light, hate, love, whatever. But this is like something that seemed a little bit like different. And I feel like it's where I'm at in my spiritual practice right now. I feel like some of my practices are in the sunset phase, and then there's these other group of practices that are in the sunrise phase, and none of them have fully set or fully risen, but I'm trying to like not be so rigid and polarized as to like it has to look how it always did or it has to look something different. And so that looks like, altars that I've tended to for a decade, dismantling them and either resetting them up differently or setting them up in a different or not setting them up at all. They're like our deities and energies that I've worked with for a long time that I'm sort of releasing those contracts to make space for something else. Tarot is still a part of my practice and it's been across the board. But also like I was practiced a healing modality decade that I was doing these even remote group healings with, and that stopped resonating with me. So I stopped doing the healing sessions and I stopped doing the group because I don't know, I'm just really flexible like that, I guess. And maybe that's part of, we talk about me being a Scorpio, but is able to sort of let some of those things go and reinvent what that looks like. And maybe sharing this with people will also help them understand that you don't have to hold on to all these practices just because you used to. And if something's speaking to you, it might be nice to try. But at the same time, I will say, you don't get depth by bouncing around too much. So these practices that I'm sunsetting have been with me for some 7, 10, 12 years, depending on what it is. And because of that, I think I got to, for myself, to the bottom of it, like not bottom in a bad way, but to the depth of it. And now I want to access something else. So I don't recommend hopping around too much. I do think that there's something about that practice and sticking with something for a long time. But even my meditation practice has changed. I did Kundalini yoga for quite some time. Don't do that so much anymore. I don't know. Does that answer your question? If you would have asked me this question a year ago, I would have said, I do this, 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 this. This is my practice. But now I'm in this, like I said, this sunset, sunrise energy. And I don't know. Maybe ask me next year.
She's in her Scorpio death card phase.
Yeah. That's a good question.
So you mentioned your altar, and this is actually a question from Clover, but it's one of my favorite questions that she's ever asked me, which is, when you're an ancestor, what would you want someone to leave for you on their ancestor altar to you? I know, it's good, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Good job, Clover.
Yeah.
Clover is one of our team members who is the head of our operations. And so if you've ordered online, Clover's magic has touched your product. Actually, if you've ordered anything, or bought anything in any of our stores, they've passed through Clover's hands, which is a blessing for you. I love the idea. Just first thing that came to mind is the Empress card. That's the first thing that came to mind. So also, if any of my ancestors are listening to this way into the future, yeah, use the Empress card. But I'm trying to think, are you thinking more of like an offering or just like a personal effect?
Yeah, like an offering. What you would want them to leave, like coffee or
Got it.
sweets.
I do love coffee. I've never thought of this, so I don't know that. Oh my gosh,
She's
here we
here.
go. All right. Hey girl, we're live.
Hi,
We're just like
great.
we were
made
just
it.
Hi.
we were just chatting, filling
Was
the time.
demanded, my computer demanded that to open this app that I update Chrome, and I had to find a folder. I like literally don't know how to do that. So
Oh,
Here we are.
But you're here now. You did
You're
it.
here. Okay,
I did
great.
it.
Well, we were
All right,
just
well.
shooting. She was just interviewing me. This is Ariel. She's our producer because we're like, what are we going to do? Hi.
Hi,
Okay.
everybody.
That's so magical. Okay, great. So Ariel's going to go off camera, but she'll be there.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Let me just do your intro. How funny. This is so great. Let me just do your intro real quick and then we'll jump
Fabulous.
into it. I'm sorry about all of the technical
I'm
issues.
sorry. Yeah, it's all right.
I just
Divine
thought, I'm like,
timing.
maybe we had like East Coast, West Coast issues or something like that. So let me open my note.
Tech drama.
And I was going to ask you before we started how to pronounce your last name because I want to say it correctly.
It's Karnatz.
Karnatz. Okay, great.
Mhm.
So welcome. This is Jessie Susannah Karnatz, aka the Money Witch. She brings capitalism-critical, shame-free education to healers, hustlers, and creatives in order to catalyze change in their financial lives. She believes healing our finances will bring blessings to our lives, our lineages, and our communities. She offers education, money magic products, and intuitive financial coaching online and in the Bay Area, and does it all with impeccable business lady style. She is also the cult leader of the Money Coven, an online web of magical beings who are healing their relationship with money, showing up for their financial self-care, and becoming powerful stewards to their resources. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm just so glad that you're here and that we're able to make this work.
Good.
Okay, so quick question for you right off the top
Mhm.
is and I did not submit this question, but it came to me as I've been thinking about you. You have such a way and ease about discussing uncomfortable topics that need to be addressed. Has that always been the way for you, or like did you have to do some work around that to feel comfortable in that space?
I think that I always have wanted to talk about taboo things, and I have a Scorpio rising, so I'm gonna say like some of it is that. And then all the Aries, which is just kind of like fuck it, like let's go, let's just do it.
Mhm.
I think that I have had to like and honestly, I have so much more to go, like I learn all
Mhm.
the time and change all the time and develop all the time. But I think that the thing that I had to work the most on is like my own fragility because I feel like, if I think back to sort of like late teen or college years, I really always did want to get in like the debate about things. But I think I would get like, I was like, my perspective was skewed or like I would get my feelings hurt or those kinds of things. But I think a lot of it was really just like my own fragility around my own identity and things like that. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's taken like what it takes is kind of like resilience work
Yeah.
and also just being like um when things are hard or there's conflict, it's not necessarily like about me or an indictment of me or an indictment of my personality. It's just like things are hard
Yeah.
and it's like, these problems are bigger, these topics are bigger than we're like gonna solve in a lifetime. And so like I'm not gonna come in and say the perfect thing.
Mhm.
Um I try to be very like mindful of the way that I say things. And I think also like I feel like that's one of my God-given gifts. And part of the reason I do talk about things is because I feel like what I've learned um, in my kind of decade in this business and in a like slightly more public eye is that um, one of the gifts I have to offer the collective is like putting language on things that are complex or difficult.
Yeah.
And so I try to do that when I feel really called. And I often like, there's plenty of things I don't speak on, but I usually will speak on something when I feel really called and like that the right framing and phrasing has been like given to me in a kind of like channeling sense. I'll take that as like a sign that like this is where I'm supposed to speak. And I do a lot of counsel. Like I have people surrounding me that I really trust. And so I do a lot of kind of like bouncing things off of like, wherever I feel like edginess around things, I'll ask people around me that I trust, both before and after to kind of like be honing my own um what my one of my coaches, Nikki Black, calls like abolitionist intuition. Um
Mm.
so yeah.
Wow.
It's
So what would that
that's
sound like? So if someone wanted to practice that, I love the idea of having sort of a cohort of people that are
Mhm.
different from you that you can bounce it off. Like what would a question like that sound like if someone had never even thought to ask someone else because they're so afraid?
Like, well, I could almost in reverse. A friend of
Okay.
mine texted me recently. We're both Jewish people, and right now as we're recording this, like the topic that everyone is talking about is like the atrocity unfolding in Palestine. And she texted me in response to something that I had sent to her, and she said, I have these questions and I'm like legitimately don't understand how to ask anyone these questions without being like accused of supporting
Mhm.
genocide. And and maybe that's what you're going to do, but like if not, like are you open to talking about it? Could you like help me talk about these couple questions that I
Yeah.
have?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's an example of like a way that it would
Yes.
come the other way,
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
I
thank you.
could be
That's really
somebody's
good.
counsel. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think sometimes there's that paralysis where it's like that fear, that fragility that you're talking about. So thank you for just helping put words to how you would even phrase something like that. Because some people might feel very vulnerable to admit, you know,
Everyone has an edge
right.
to everything. One of the portals that we use in my money coven is financial literacy. And I think we think of literacy as being really like you have it or you don't, especially around financial literacy, you have it or you don't. But I'm like, everyone has an edge to every literacy that they have, right? Like you're literate in whatever and there's an edge to it, and there's like we can't be ashamed that there's like an edge to our literacies,
Hmm.
because that's just like the state of reality,
Right.
in
Right.
everything. So I think like not being afraid to identify the edge of the reality, and like you're saying, like there's this anxiety about being like, oh, I don't know. And I feel like I've really internalized that in the past and felt like that me like I should know, or it means something about me, that I don't know, or I can't like develop this idea. But I think the more that I've been able to say like I don't know, or even like on the internet, right? Like on Instagram when we're getting into conversations about something and then someone will like take it to a point where they're like, well, what about this? And I'm like, I don't know. I need it,
Yeah.
I don't know. I need to think about it for a while.
Yeah, and I think that's a great answer too, right? There is that pressure to know, especially someone like you that's in a public eye. Sometimes people demand, we're an instant response. And I think it's a mature, informed way to be to say, yeah, I have to learn more about that, or I need to ask somebody, or
Yeah,
I'm
let
not
me go to
sure.
somebody who I know is
Yeah.
thinking about this thing all the time.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I'm thinking about my cousin Dan. He's amazing, but he's kind of one of those people for me about certain topics and subjects. And I think it's great also to be that person for others too. It's like a real reciprocity, even if it's not a one to one. It's like
Exactly.
you help someone else and they help you, or whatever that is.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks
Counsel is
for
really
that.
important to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. I love that idea. Well, I just jumped into that question.
Yeah, great.
I just want to go into like your book. A lot of what I'd like to talk to you about is information that I gained from your book. I loved it. It was so different. To me, it is a book about financial wellness and accountability, but it's a book of healing. And I feel like if you go through those steps and audit any part of your life and then just change it from money to love,
I
or,
agree. Yep.
it's a healing book. And I think it's cool that you like centered it around money because it is an edgy topic for a lot of folks. But I haven't seen it done the way that you did it. And I also just really am going to applaud you for some of these topics that you bring to mind in the wellness, self-help, spiritual community, where there's a lot of glassing over or glazing over, or like bypassing or not really talking about the thing. Like it's not just your vibration. You're also born into a certain socioeconomic status, or we're part of a capitalist society. There's all these other things. So I want to talk to you about all of it. And I've been waiting to talk to someone that could really hit those topics. I've been
Yeah.
interviewing lots of people in abundance, and there's a well of people in like the spiritual, like law of attraction space,
Yeah.
but this has got that grittiness to it that's real. So I love that. So thank you. Not saying not to diss other opinions, but this is
Yeah.
like a real talk.
I think it reminds me of like the question we were just talking about, because it's like I think sometimes the glossing over happens when people don't know. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So it's like, and some of these things, like it's about reconciliation, and there's like a friction, and it's like, how do I reconcile that and that? And then it's like, I don't know, so maybe I'm not really going to go there, or it's not like
Mhm.
the most important thing to me, so I'm not gonna, which is where the privilege dynamic comes in, right? Like, I
Right.
don't have to figure out how to reconcile like systemic scarcity and my lived experience and how the law of attraction is supposed to work, so I just won't. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but I might think very deeply into certain other aspects of it,
Yeah.
So I think it's like reconciliation work to be like, okay, if these vibrational tools work, or like if abundance is a real thing, or if manifestation is a real thing, then how do we kind of reconcile or explain like systemic economic inequality,
Yeah.
right? Like, and but I'm like, this is a human question. Like, it's the same. It's like, why do bad things happen to good people, right? Like, it just like happen, or
Mhm.
it's like, if there's a God, like, why was there slavery, like all these kinds of things, right? Like, that's how do we reconcile concepts of spirit and spirituality and a plan, or like fatedness, or any of these things, right? Having impact energetically on the world around us, and the fact that we're like also obviously surrounded by suffering that is like being not just imposed by like natural events, but being imposed by other humans. um yeah, so it's really like, I am also intrigued, right? Like, and I feel like that's the work
Mhm.
of like not just my lifetime, but human lifetime. Like, that's the existential crisis, basically. So
Yeah, and that's what we'll probably be discussing a lot today. And then also to remind, like you reminded me of something I read in your book about the glossing over. I mean, you even call it out in the book where you're like, if you're tuning out right now, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Or like, because I don't know if you can just tell like where people might in certain areas of the book like hit their edge, or just maybe generally like if you're going through this information and you're finding yourself just glazing over, it's time to like take a walk, put it down, take a minute, but come back to it. But it's also it was such a good context clue as to like where your edge is to see like exactly what you're saying, where you
yeah.
tune out.
Yeah, where do you, right? So it's like, okay, because I notice for myself, like, I have ADHD, and I'm like, I notice all the time where I'm like, it happens more with me with podcasts and less with books, but like where I'll be like listening, and then I'll be like, I didn't listen to the last 5 minutes of that, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, like, let me run it back. And I think people do it all the time, but I am also curious about, yeah, like what happened in that exact moment? Like, what happened in that exact
Mhm.
moment where you like detoured? And often for me with podcasts, it's like some sort of creative spark. Like, I'll be
Mm.
like, oh, that makes me think of this, and then I'm kind of like on a little creative journey in my mind. But I think oftentimes when we're dealing with like hard stuff or money or financial documents, it's like something we don't understand, right? Like,
Mhm.
you read a number that you're just like, I don't even know what this means. Or it's like, oh, gather, you're like, I need a file for my LLC, or, whatever it is, like, go get my this, and this. And you're like, oh, my profit and loss state. Like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
Or like, and then it's just kind of like, okay, bye.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gone. So I think it's like, if we took that as the edge of our literacy and then reformulated it into a question, like, I wonder what that is. Like, I wonder what a profit and loss statement is, and kind of like
Mhm.
went in an exploration. Um, I think it's just a more self-loving approach.
Yeah. It
'Cause it's like,
definitely is.
yeah, if you think about a kid, right? And it's like, if you're reading a book, if they were reading, when you're like, have that early readers and they're reading, and then it's like, if you got to a word they didn't know and you were just like, fuck it, like let's just not read this book anymore. Like it's not a very like loving way to treat a child. And it's like, you need to be like, here's the word, like let's sound it out, like what does it mean, like let's try again. And it's like we deserve that with
Yeah.
ourselves.
For sure. And you know what? I also appreciate what you have mentioned in this book, or what this book really is an empowerment tool for you to get those skills up and gain that literacy. And if you don't mind, I'll just share something
Yeah.
brief with me is that, my business grew really quickly, and I call myself an accidental entrepreneur. So I didn't know that any of
Yeah.
this stuff. I thought I was going to make just like be able to, sell some crystals and do some tarot readings. And it turned into like a very big organization. And because of my lack of confidence in this financial area, I wound up actually losing a lot of money paying
Mhm.
people to like help me understand this, that, or the other. But they didn't really help me understand. They just kind of like did it for me. And I always was like wobbly in that confidence. And I feel like I made some poor financial decisions actually because I wasn't like synthesizing and really understanding the information and then partnering with my intuition, which is my superpower. So I'm just throwing it out there for people that this is really worthwhile, especially we have a lot of people that might be like entrepreneurs or solopreneurs in this community. It's so empowering, and you'll trust your decision so much more when you can integrate that information. Just throwing
Yeah,
that
I
out
mean,
there.
if you have signed up for the like small business life,
Mhm.
that group, I call it my business coven. And it's like, if you're in the business coven, you have to figure this stuff out. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got to, because that's the difference really between being a business person and just being a really skilled practitioner, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't just be like, I'm a really skilled practitioner who doesn't want to have a boss, but I won't really like run the business either.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
you can, and we hack it together, right? Like it's like
Mhm.
we're a crafty bunch, but and then a lot of us hack it together for multiple years. But I definitely, especially when I was doing bookkeeping and taxes, yeah, I went into all kinds of business situations with people who had pretty successful, from the outside, what people, I mean, they were successful businesses. I don't want to undercut their success, like just because like they didn't have their bookkeeping done or whatever. But yeah, it's surprising how far a small business can get without, like there would be people who are like, oh, the first 3 or 4 years of their business, like they haven't done bookkeeping, they haven't filed taxes,
Yeah.
and they even like have a brick and mortar store, or those kinds of things. So
Yeah.
it's a gift to
Embarrassingly,
self.
okay, the embarrassing admission for me is I ran the first year of my business not having a business license because I didn't even know that was a thing that you needed to have.
Yeah,
I
don't
had
even worry about that one. Yes.
so I think the interesting thing that like empowering yourself with this kind of information as a business owner is you don't know what you don't know sometimes.
Yes.
So it just like helps you see the fuller picture. Okay, so I would like to swing back to like that edge and kind of glossing over because it kind of ties into something I wanted to talk to you about regarding people's relationship to shame.
Mm.
And like maybe that's sort of a reason why you avoid looking at these sort of things or like not admitting that you hit your edge. Um, and because you talk about it a lot in your book. And so I'm curious about like how you see the relationship between money and shame in certain situations and how it's also kind of like connected into like the subject of money is like interconnected to so many areas of our lives and our self-worth and our psyches.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that happens with money, especially, if we're going to kind of like reinvoke this business coven group, or, any kind of like professionals, people who are really successful in other areas of their life, like they're amazing community organizers, they're like, really great with their family, like any of these things, it's like, and then you get into the money part, and money is sort of the place in your life where you feel the least successful, and the least competent, even if you're making money, but you're just like, I'm not managing this. I'm like, I haven't filed my taxes. Like, there's these secrets too, right? So, secrets is one place where we get shamed. Like, I haven't filed my taxes for however many years and nobody knows. And, or like, I have like a credit card addiction. And I'm like shopping, online at night and nobody knows. Or, I'm like buying things and hiding them from my partner. Or, I don't know how to hit these goals in my business, like whatever it is, right? And it's often in this kind of stark juxtaposition to the way we're living our lives as like successful people in community, where like people are constantly like, you're so great, or I really admire the things that you're doing, or, you know, you're such a boss, or whatever this is. And then it's like, oh, but you don't really know, you know, like actually I'm really a mess and you don't know. So I think that's one way shame can show up. I think shame is a form of internalized oppression. So stories that other people were invested, or like the system is invested in us believing, can come internalized and be shame, which, you know, can be like for people who were socialized as women, things about like math, numbers, you know, control of household finances, those kinds of things. You know, for people who are socialized or like racialized as Black and brown, for feeling like, oh, you can never work enough, or like you always are like getting too much for like not doing enough. Like there's all these like messaging that you know, there's a systemic investment in you believing that, because it's like when you believe it, then you act from that place, and it's sort of like you're oppressing yourself. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're doing the
Yeah.
work for the system. You're compliant, right? Basically, like you're compliant with the system. And so that is huge with shame. And, you know, so much of that is like work, numbers, math, like all of that stuff, right? Like super easy to get activated. Our family patterns, just like any kind of, you know, abuse, shame, like shame is just massive. It's so pervasive. And so I think like when money brings up those things, that's that like interconnected web. Like there's this web of thought feelings where it's sort of like, I don't really want to touch that, because when I touch that, it lights up all those other little points, you know, and then I am suffering, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like more in touch with the suffering that maybe I'm kind of like putting to the side, you know, or covering up somehow. So I think that, I mean, it makes sense just from an animal perspective to kind of like avoid the things that feel painful. But when you get in it, you know, just like anything, like we've all done this work. That's the thing with financial healing, right? It's like I look at it two ways. Like, you know, the premise of my work is heal your finances, and that's in the subtitle of the book. And I think it works two ways. One, it's like we're people. If you even are finding this book, you're already engaged in healing work, right? Like you've already done it about something at least. And I'm like, okay, apply, but we don't really think like apply that stuff to your money, right? So it's like number one, heal your finances by applying everything you know about healing already, like to your money. And then the other side is like use your money as a portal to like learn more about yourself and just expand like your healed self in general, you know, like build your self-awareness, like do your shadow work, because um when something feels painful and we're kind of avoiding it, it's like there's stuff in there. And it doesn't like go away because we don't deal with money or we're not like, you know, doing our budgeting. It's just sort of like, oh, it's just undigested content, really, you know? So it's
Yeah.
an opportunity to really like, okay, let me go in and start touching this with support, you know, with a healing lens, like with a liberatory lens, so that I can kind of see what's in there and I can kind of synthesize and digest some of this stuff and just become a more integrated person.
Yeah, for sure. I think like with me when I started doing, you talk a lot about the book, or like there's a section about awareness and like bringing these certain patterns to awareness and all of that. And for me, that's when I became aware of actually some shame. Just it wasn't
Mm,
necessarily about money, but like I was embarrassed of the awarenesses because it felt like I was walking around almost like a booger hanging out of my nose and I didn't know it was there, but everyone else can see it.
yeah.
And that's sort of like some of this awareness piece. So that's why I do think that it was smart of you and how you the progression of the book to deal with sort of the shame piece first, so that by the time you work through that and get to the awarenesses, maybe there is that healing lens of feeling less embarrassed, or you know, from like the I don't know, we show our asses sometimes. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean, you're just gonna, you know, like I think there's so much desire to, I don't know, just preemptively sweep it all up, before anyone
Yeah.
can notice, but it's just impossible, and it's not, I mean, that's vulnerability, right? Like that's humanity, and like connecting in humanity, and we have to allow ourselves and everyone else to be human. Like it's like the most liberatory thing we can do. And
Mm,
shame, I mean, that's like I just feel like shame is just such a waste of our precious life force, because it really is about, like, I don't know, like demonizing the ways that we're human. And I'm just like, that is terrible, you know?
yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
let yourself be human.
I mean, is that also part of like, I guess, perfectionism,
Yes.
too? It's like not have so how I'm sure you've mentioned this in the book, but it's escaping me. How does perfectionism play into like the system that you're talking about that, that where we oppress ourselves, but we do the job for the system. When you say the system, can you clarify what you mean by that? And how does, if any, perfectionism play into that?
Yeah. I the term I use in the book is curiarchy, and that is like a very particular kind
Yes.
of like academic term that was coined by a white feminist biblical scholar, actually, in the 90s.
Okay.
She's cool. She's a cool babe. But it basically is like, also like Kimberly Crenshaw, the concept of intersectionality, and I think it's Patricia Hill Collins who says like matrix of oppressions. So it's like these intersecting systems, which, I feel like that kind of concept has become sort of more entered slightly into the mainstream in the past, like, 5 or so years, which is like, it's not just uh we're not just thinking about like race or class or, economics or um able-bodied, you know beingness, or um any of these other things. It's like, or like age, it's like they're all connected in like in this matrix of oppression. So when I'm talking about money, I think like, what I say is like racial capitalism, because I feel like that's a good way to kind of like sum it all up, because we're talking about essentially, in this moment, the system that we're operating in is most heavily impacted by um I mean, this really wild like series of events that's unfolded over the last 1,000 years. That's like this kind of system of colonialism that's, I think, starts with like the Roman Empire, and, whatever. Anyway, I could really nerd out about this for a long time, but like, we don't have that kind of time. But it's like, what are the beliefs about ourselves and about each other? How do we yeah, like, how have we taken on this belief system from racial capitalism? And the thing about racial, like race in cap, all these things is, um, it's a hierarchy, right? So all of these systems are about hierarchy, and in a hierarchy, right, it's like what's good and what's bad, and then we do that with ourselves, right? Like what's good is like having it together and knowing everything, you know what I mean? And like what's
Mm,
bad is like, being seen as not having it all together, or, having this vulnerability. Um, and then humans, like in race or in any kind of like hierarchical system, it's like uh it's an arrangement of bodies in relationship to, in a hierarchy, in a relationship to power. So, it's like we say, like, it's not real. Like whiteness isn't like a real thing. Like paleness of skin is a real thing, right? Or like European ancestry is a real thing. But like whiteness isn't a nature, it's not in nature. It's a concept that's created in relationship to hierarchy, right? Like it's like white only exists in relationship to black, brown, like other racialized bodies, right? So, and it's an arrangement in a hierarchy. So, um, when we're thinking about the way that we've like taken these things on, and money is just, it's all of that. It's your whole story of upbringing, right? Which is all about money and what you like, if you had it or you didn't have it. And why did your family have it or not have it? And how did they psychologically manage the experience of having it or not having it, and why they had it or didn't have it, right? That's
Wow.
basically formulating your entire life, right?
Yes.
And then it's like, how do you internalize that process? And I think that's shame.
Yeah. That is shame. And then sort of like that perfectionism too is sort of like in this weird messed up way. Is it kind of like the top of the pyramid? Like we want to
Exactly.
be
Yeah,
seen.
perfectionism is, you're at the top. You're, all these things, right? That it's like that people want to be white,
Right.
thin,
Yeah.
pretty, quote unquote, whatever, like anything, rich, any of these things,
Yeah.
able-bodied, that we like want to be because it's just the way that it was arranged. This is what we've put at the top. And
Right.
people want to be at the top because we've also said the highest value within racial capitalism is to be at the top.
Right. Right.
That's what you should be striving towards, is getting as close to the top as you possibly can.
Yeah. So like when people hear this, what you're talking about, and they consider themselves like spiritually minded people, it's like, how do we hold those paradoxes between the fact that we're like spiritual beings and we want to do well and be in integrity, and then also like reconcile this capitalism that we're part of that system. So I get like, what would you say to that?
Well, one, I think I just want to like highlight. I have all of my
Yeah.
highlighters out because I was like stress arranging
do
them
it.
into a rainbow. So I'm like, highlight. Highlight the we're part of it, right? Like that's number one. I feel like so many people politically and spiritually like come at a different lens, but it's sort of like, how can I essentially like excuse myself from even being like implicated in this system? And I'm just like, you cannot.
Yeah.
You can't. You cannot excuse yourself from being implicated in this system. Like whether you're like impacting others or being impacted, right? Like, and most of us are doing both all the time. So, there's that. I think that's really important. And then, the way that I personally reconcile it, my like personal, I don't know, attempt is what I call the earth journey. So my belief is that our souls, it's sort of like a reincarnation belief, but like our souls are working out certain pieces of healing and information over time through like multiple um, incarnations, and that each of us is sort of like weaving in a thread of healing into the tapestry. And you don't have to believe in reincarnation. Like you could believe like you have one life and this is what you're doing, but you're here. I feel like you're here for a reason. You're here to do a piece of evolution, for yourself. And in doing that evolution, or for your soul, and in doing that evolution, you're also doing it on behalf of all of humanity and all of existence. So we're all kind of like weaving this tapestry of evolution. And everyone puts in their work, and some people put in a lot of work because that's the sort of like healer or healing track, right? Because I think like not everybody who's like, oh, it's really important to me to do a lot of healing in this lifetime necessarily needs to say like, and now I'm a healer. It's like, and also we all are healing presences, right? Like we all have our own special like medicine that we give, whether that's just like in our family home, we're the whatever, the peacemaker, or the one who always cheers everybody up with jokes, or you know what I mean, like the one who makes the delicious thing that makes everybody at the school happy, or whatever it is, right? Like everybody has their own little like healing, magic. But yeah, so anyway, people who are really called into this paradigm, I think, are just like way more in touch with like, oh, I have a curriculum, I need some tools, like I really need to do this. I'm doing this on behalf of lineage, I'm doing this on behalf of my family, I'm doing this on behalf of like, descendants. I'm like engaging in that in a high level way. But I think that that's why we're here. And I think that I don't believe in the idea of like being born at the wrong time. You know, people were like, oh, I was born in the wrong era. And I'm like,
Right.
no, like, no, your body and your soul meet in a particular moment in time space. And this is for you because this is your curriculum. So I'm like, if you're here now, capitalism is not like an accident. It's like this, you're a part of the story. You are a part of the story of racial capitalism and what and how we evolve through it,
Mm.
you know, inside of it, through it, hopefully out of it. You're called into this moment to be present here. And I do think people can feel very in touch with information from other dimensions or lifetimes, you know, but to me, I'm like, don't, the earth journey is like, this is your soul's most important work at this time, as evidenced
Yeah.
by the fact that you're doing it, right? It's relatively short. I say like we get like a 0 to 120 years of doing this in this body, in this moment in space-time. And you may have like a heightened ability to access information from other lives, from other dimensions. But I'm like, just chill because you will go back. Like, don't worry. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to go back into like cosmic matter, you know, God willing, not today, but like relatively shortly. So just be here and do this because
Mhm.
that's what you're being called to do,
Yeah.
you know, and you need it. Like, you need
Yeah.
it. You need all of the information to like synthesize into like whatever it is that you're doing. So if you're bypassing stuff, you know, or avoiding it, it's like you're not really, um, you know, when they do the grade, they're going to be like my son just got a D on his English class project, you know, and it was like, he's like, well, we did it. And I'm like, yeah, but are there like pieces of the list where you were like, and you're supposed to use this word 3 times or like whatever, you know, that you just didn't do. And I feel like it's like that, right? Like you can live your human life, but if you're like ignoring the systems that we're living in or ignoring money or ignoring your body or ignoring, you know, family or whatever, like you're probably not like hitting all the points on the grading rubric.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a very powerful message for people that follow Modern Mystic is people that follow you too. Like they're on this spiritual quest and journey and everything is a spiritual test or a
Yeah.
spiritual learning. You can, and when you frame life that way, you also like walk around as an integrated human being. There's not like this spiritual side and this all you. And
Yeah.
it's about like being fluid into knowing like when to lean into which parts, you know. But I think it is easy, especially when people first start getting online with some of their intuitive gifts and abilities or their rituals working. It is interesting sometimes to detour. People like detour because they're like, well, that's new and exciting.
Well, it can
But
be a way to
I
check out. Like it's
totally
definitely more pleasant to like do a meditation all day and like channel information from Atlantis and like hold on to a crystal and then like eat a smoothie. Like that's more pleasant. Like I know I've got tons. I have them everywhere. But it's like, you know, it's definitely more pleasant to do that, like way to spend a day than it is to like you know, like dissect like how am I contributing to colonialism? You know, like what's my whatever. But I'm like, honestly, that's all the work. That's all the work.
yeah.
So
Yeah, especially being born in this country at
yeah.
this time,
Which
which
exactly like
was
I'm like, which you
yeah, what you're
were, which you
saying.
were, which you were,
Yeah.
which you were. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
check, check,
Yes,
check. So
exactly.
let's
So
not
let's do
check
it.
out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Check, check,
Yeah.
check. So now let's check out. Sometimes I say, get excited about reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, look, this might be a segue. It's a little bit different topic, but I love how you define and you talk about the subconscious mind in this book too, because I do believe that's what creates your reality. Speaking of reality, but I don't know that everyone actually understands what it is. I feel like feel like people like throw it around like without understanding. So, would you mind just defining what that term means in your experience and how that actually plays into your reality around your financial wellness?
Sure. And actually, when you wrote that question, I was like, what does it mean? Like it caused me to
Ah,
also look it up because I was like, let me see what
you're like,
I
what did I say
think. I
about
know.
that?
What did I say about this? And, I mean, I know when I was writing the book, there was like little bits of research like as it was going on. But um, okay, so this is what I came up with. In the psychological perspective, which like mostly in terms of unconscious mind, it comes from like Freud and then Jung. And that's so it's like in psychology, there's only like the unconscious mind and the conscious mind. And then they called like the semi-conscious states. So it's like dreaming, lucid, states, like anything that intuition, whatever, like access to information, like that's kind of like our semi-conscious world. I think when we talk about it in like the kind of new age world, we're talking about information that is below the surface, but that impacts our behavior, our thinking, our feelings, um, but we're not necessarily aware. And I pulled a definition actually of the like unconscious mind because I liked this sentence. It said processes of the mind that occur automatically and are not available to introspection. So I thought that
Mm,
was really interesting, right? It's sort of like it's the part of us that like we can't even consider or ponder because we just don't even see it.
mm-hmm.
And that it includes repressed things that are repressed, subliminal perceptions, and automatic reactions. So this was really interesting to me when thinking about money, right? Because it's sort of like some of the automatic reactions are just built from being an animal, I think, right? Like it's like our whatever lizard brains or whatever we call it. And then some of that is going to be built through our experience growing up. So that's
Mm-hmm.
trauma. Um, and then subliminal perceptions is going to be kind of like our messaging, whether that's like collective societal messaging or it is individual messaging that we receive through our families, and through
Mm-hmm.
our lineages, of just sort of like, what do we just believe as a default without even considering like, oh, there could be another way to think about this?
Yeah.
And then the repressed stuff. So I think this is a lot of what's getting activated when we're doing a healing journey, whether it's healing our
Mm-hmm.
finances or whatever. We're just like, oh, I'm doing this thing that should feel a certain way. Like I'm being told by these blogs, like, just go categorize your things on QuickBooks. And then I go to do it and like I feel horrible, and it's like, the blog doesn't say I should feel horrible. It just says like I should just do it. So there's something wrong with me. Then we're back to shame, right? There's something wrong with me because it's supposed to just be easy. So either there's something wrong with me because I can't do it, or there's something wrong with me because um like I can't make myself not feel bad enough to do it. That's that
Yeah.
willpower ethic. Um, so any of those things can kind of pop up. But I think that in using this, like if you're really present with your money, and we're kind of using financial healing as a portal for self-awareness, it's like when we're doing healing, a lot of what we're doing is creating a safe space and then kind of like trying to reach through the portal a little bit to be like, is there like what could we kind of recover or pull through into the conscious minds from that subconscious, or what were they calling the semi-conscious mind? Like are there things, which some of it can be dangerous. So like if repressed, you pull out repressed things, it's like there was a reason why we were repressing these things, like sometimes it can feel
Mm-hmm.
really dangerous. So but we're pulling through like, oh, remembering that things happened, also like exploring our relationship to like, how did we get here, why do we believe the things that we believe, um and just sort of like trying to integrate as much of it as we can, like digest, integrate, process, accept, grieve, embrace, let go, um, as much of ourselves as possible. So I think that that's kind of maybe one of the marks of healing, is like making a conscious choice to do it. Cause I was thinking how much of things that like actually even are in people's conscious mind, are they sometimes like, oh, but I'm not even, I know this, but I'm not even going to go there. Like I'm going to kind of do
Mm,
this conscious version of repressing, which is like denying or avoiding, right? Like,
yeah. Avoidance is a big one, I'm
com-
sure, in your field too,
oh,
around money.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
Compartmentalizing, and just be like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to deal with this. But then it's like, so making that choice to just say, like, healing anything, but healing your finances is like, I'm going to say yes. Like, I'm going to try to like face and look at and explore and acknowledge the reality of the existence of as much of this information as possible. And then I'm going to like, try to pull as much more through as possible. And I'm going to make the do the work to integrate it.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I mean, basically what you're talking about with this subconscious mind is it's sort of like, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for
That's
me,
fine.
it's sort of like the motor that's running your life, but you don't even realize it's what's like
Mm,
driving your life sometime, unless you like get behind the wheel consciously and you're like, okay, I'm going to steer this a
yeah.
specific way. And if you use you talk a lot about awareness in the book, and in my experience, if you just pay attention to how you do anything, it will give you so much information. Like, for instance, like
$5,000%.
I'm teaching a tarot class, right? So it's like I'm working with 40 people and I do it a few times a year, but you can see that, like, I just tell the students, like, pay attention what comes up for you when you pull a tarot card, because it's giving you a lot of information about how you do a lot of things, or how you're a student, or how you like have to do it exactly perfect before you'll even open your mouth to describe what the card means. And so this like awareness and like bringing things from, maybe the subconscious or unconscious forward is really just a fancy way to say, like, pay attention.
Hmm.
Just like pay attention to
Yeah.
yourself. And you're using money as a means of that self-discovery, which is awesome, because I think it's so polarizing sometimes that it's like an alarm bell, like you can't miss it. But even if you look at it, some of the more simple tasks that you do or don't do, that might be less triggering for people. Let's say if money's too triggering for that to be the place
Yeah.
for you to start with your awareness, find something else that's like less, confronting, and start to notice, and then start thinking about, well, how does this show up in this area of life, or does this show up with this person or whatever? And you
Hmm.
get a lot of information, and you can actually start to use it for healing. Like, this is just showing you where you might need some more healing and support or knowledge or whatever.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you. I just love talking about this. Okay, I learned so much stuff from reading your book. I'm going to read it again, because I was
Cool.
reading it with the mind of like interviewing you,
Yeah.
but now I just want to read it as like a consumer. I've never heard of this, but some of these phrases, which I love. Can you talk about financial gaslighting?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I see this come up in multiple ways. So one is like a form of abuse, like financial abuse that people experience in their family. And abuse can be kind of an extreme term for some of the things that people might experience, but it's like if what you can see or perceive as true is different than what you're being told is true about money, it can really make it difficult for you, especially as a child. It can make it difficult. It sort of morphs your concept of like what reality is, right? Which is what gaslighting does, or like emotional abuse. It's sort of like, what is, it undermines your sense of like what is reality.
Mhm.
So like a very concrete example of this would be like, you as a child, you're being told like there's no money for whatever it is, like you can't take, I don't know, dance classes, or
Mhm.
you can't go on the school trip, because there's no money for that. And at the same time, you're able to observe that maybe someone in your family is gambling away a lot of money, or
Right.
someone in your family is addicted to shopping, and there's like a lot of like things coming into the house, or there's like status items being bought, and there's this external like, oh well, we have this car and we have these clothes, but then like I'm being told like, no, there's no money for you to go to the dentist or something like that, right? And you're like, how
Mhm.
can there be money but also not be money? It's very like confusing to especially a child mind. So then it's like when you're a teenager in your 20s, an adult, like really trying to formulate your own relationship to financial reality, it's like easy to kind of tap into this dual reality of like there's always simultaneously not enough money and money to say yes to things that maybe we don't need, which there's nothing wrong with buying things or like, engaging in things that you like want and don't need, but it's sort of about like priority, right?
Yeah.
So that would be like one idea. And then I think one of the things about financial gaslighting is it's also happening on a systemic level, right? Because it's like, a lot of colonial mythology is gaslighting, right? Like we're like, people have money because they're like deserving, right? Or like if you're poor, it's sort of through like your moral ineptitude and like the moral failing of your family, which is just not true, right? Like, it's just not true. So, or like, even, I feel like there's so much discourse lately around like, well, there's enough money for war, but there's not enough money to like forgive student loans, or there's not, it's sort of like that's the
Yeah, I
government's
was gonna ask
version
you about
of
that.
that. Yeah, of just
Yeah,
being
because
like,
it does
okay,
seem
how could
like
there
there's
be $144 billion, but also be like, no, we can't possibly do this thing that costs $2 billion. Like how can both of those things be true at the same time?
Yeah, that's what when you were talking about that from a bigger level, that's exactly what I was thinking about. It's like it's really our government is showing us different priorities,
Exactly.
perhaps, and not necessarily the truth. Or, I mean, they just keep printing money, right? It's
Yeah.
like,
Well, and it's like even as a kid, right? It's a really rough thing to learn and absorb, but it's like basically what they're saying is like it's just not, yeah, it's not our priority.
yeah,
So it's like
yeah,
no parent is going to say like um well, no, because it's like more important to me to like have Alexis than it is for you to like play violin.
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean?
That's true.
So they're going to come
Yeah,
up with some story about like why it's true, which is like you don't deserve violin, or like, whatever it is. I don't know,
yeah, yeah,
and it's the same thing with the government, right? Like that's sort of what they're saying, like we don't deserve to have our student loans forgiven, because like basically, and it's the same poverty story, right? Because essentially like we took out the student loans because we bought something we couldn't afford, education. And if we can't pay for it, like that's not anybody else's problem. You know what I mean? It's like because ultimately it's like some kind of, somewhere along the way there's some sort of like moral failing, or else we would have had money
mm,
to pay for college.
right. Student loans is a whole other
Ah,
situation for so many people.
yes.
I just really feel like this generation got really squished,
Yep.
like we were sold a dream by our parents and like the elder generation, and we made certain decisions, and then the support that we need to like cross the finish line isn't really there. There's so many different ways about that. Well, I have a couple practical questions as we
Sure.
start to wrap this up. One is, let's just say you make a financial decision that's bad, or you make a not bad, but like you make a business risk that fails or
Hmm.
whatever. How do you sort of like regain your sense of confidence around this topic? Like if you've built up the confidence and you make that risk and then kind of backslide, is there how would you like repair that within oneself?
I think first, I mean, a lot of it's just sort of what I guess would be called mindset stuff, right? So it's like, on one hand, I would say the perfectionism, right? To just be like any
Mhm.
kind of anti perfectionism work that you can be doing, which is just literally like, I am a human. I cannot predict the result of like everything that happens. Like there is no such thing as control. There's only like the illusion of control. And this is literally just like a thing that happened. And it's like if my belief about myself is that like I can't survive a difficult time, essentially, you know what I mean? Because that's what's gonna happen, right? Like a mistake was made, things are gonna be challenging for a while you figure it out and rechart your course. So it's like if you can if you can let go a little bit of like, perfectionism on some level, I think is a belief that like we can't handle hard things and the people around us kind of can't handle hard things, but it's like really we can. We can go through a difficult time. We can ask the people around us to support us through a difficult time. Like we don't have to always be like shiny superstars in order to like be supported and loved by the people around us. I mean, in some families we do, but we can work on letting go of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing, like the perfectionism, accepting yourself as human, accepting yourself as resilient, um, understanding that like there's really no such thing as control. It was just like the illusion of control anyway. And I think like a little bit of just sort of like it's a game, it's an adventure. Like life is an adventure. You're taking risks, you're taking journeys. Nothing is really like a failure, right? So it's like, what did you learn? Like what is the, what's the lesson? What's the takeaway? Maybe you lost a bunch of money, but you came out of the other side with like a really strong community, or, like what is it that like, um, or you, it wasn't financially viable, but you carved out, 10 years to explore pursuing something that you really love, like I'm like, that's so cool because you gave yourself that time, right? Like so many people like never give themselves that time or like never try. So yeah, I think
like
like
that.
love, like a lot of love
Yeah,
and
that's the
compassion.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And then another practical question is, if you're in a relationship and you have, you talk about in the book like money goals and desires, how do you align those with a partner?
Mm.
Or and how, so where neither one of you feel like you're compromising too much or whatever. Like, do you run into that sometimes
Oh
with some
yeah.
of the people you work with? So what's your best advice for that?
I used to do more like couples coaching too, and I feel like now the framework that I do when I want coaching through now is called Empress of Fortune, and I feel like there's a number of people who have come through that program who have really like done a lot of work on their money issues with their partner, and it's all really about like cleaning up your own side of the street. A lot of it was, like, and a lot of it honestly was about like vulnerability work.
Mm.
Like, yeah, being open about like kind of things, like that perfectionism stuff, right? Like feeling like you have to have it all together. You have to, this and this, like being open to receiving help, being open to receiving input, being open to compromise. I think like that has shown up as a major theme. Honestly, too, I think in a lot of relationships, there's sort of like the money person and then the like not money person. And it's really about like both people have a role in the healing. And the person who's like the money person really needs to like tone it down on the like know-it-all-ness of it. And like, the like, it's like this, and you do this, and the person who's like the not money person often has to do a lot of work on like avoidance, and kind of, denial and head in the sands, and that kind of stuff. But both people really need to be like very loving of the work that the other person needs to do and to like understand that um the work that the other person needs to do isn't always the work that we think they need to do.
Good point.
Like we have our own little agenda of like, oh, well, if you're going to be better about this, then you need to like blah, blah, blah. But, I think really like loving the other person enough to like really see them in their whole kind of spiritual journey. And just witnessing them in them identifying like what's the work that they need to do, and then being supportive and like a kind of accountability light figure, in their life for that work, not like, okay, how are you going to show up to do this like agenda of things that like I think you need to do.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
relationship advice, period,
Yeah.
right? Financial or otherwise. That's exactly. Everyone needs to rewind and listen to that whole thing again. Because that's exactly how, I mean, it's easier said than done, but
Yeah.
that's exactly how you have a harmonious relationship. Because also like, think about it. You don't want someone else forcing you to do something or telling you what you need to do. I mean, so you think your partner's going to like that either? No, it's like,
No.
we want to be, accepted and autonomous, and we have it's like trusting that that other person has got themselves. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
and they're committed. I think one of the most
yeah,
important things is like a compatible or equal commitment to evolution,
yeah.
because not everybody does want to show up for that process of evolution, and then then you can make your own
That's a
choice
value, right?
there.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a
a
value.
value,
It is a value.
right?
Yeah.
That you probably should establish at the top of the relationship.
Ooh, there's a lot of value. I just feel like relationships are one of those things where it's like there's just no possible way that like, X number of years into it, you don't look back and be like, oh, there's some things we should have established at the top of this that we didn't. And it doesn't matter. It's like even if you do a new relationship, it's like 10 years down the line from there, you'll still be like, oh yeah,
Yeah, I should have probably
should have
addressed
known
this.
those things. Yeah, but you just
That's
don't,
so funny.
you don't know.
Well, oftentimes, and I don't know if you're prepared for this, we ask our guests to just leave a little exercise or just a little nugget of
Hmm.
something.
Let's see. I would leave this, which is money can feel so disjointed and like heady and real like air, swords energy, um, all in the realm of ideas and like our brains. And I want to remind everyone that archetypally, money is linked to earth energy. And that's like, a very, very old reminder and invitation to get connected with earth and get grounded when we're doing money work. So it's not just about like doing your ideas better or like doing your brain better or doing the numbers better or doing the computer better. It's like get grounded before you do money work. Like do a grounding meditation, find your grounding crystal, like go out and put your feet on the earth, like, whatever it is going to be your things that makes you feel grounded, like really invoke them, before you do your money work and see if it changes how it works. Like do it before you log into QuickBooks, do it before you go to do your budget, before you have a conversation with your partner about money, before you check your bank account balance, like, and see if that shifts something for you.
Yeah, I love that. And I've been hearing this message a lot from different folks regarding grounding. I love what you said about that regarding money. I just took a workshop yesterday with Kim Kranz. She made the Wild Unknown deck, and it was about the mystic's mind. But all the work we did was root chakra, because you have to be stable in your body to be able to like go on those mystic quests and know you have a safe place to return to.
Yeah.
And so I'm hearing this, I'm just saying this to our listeners. I'm hearing this from a lot of experts in the field, where I would say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, a lot of people were talking about pineal gland, third eye, activation, crown chakra. Now all the experts are like, hey, it's about
No,
root.
I'm like,
It's
babe,
about
get in your
earth.
body, like get in your
Yeah.
body. Here we are. Like we're on the earth. Like, yeah.
For sure. So maybe I'm just noticing it because it's personal messages to me. Everyone's like, get in your body. But I'm seeing those themes, and I think it's I think it's really great advice. Well, thank you so much for joining. Just want to drop like a few places where you want people to find you and so they can
Sure.
enjoy more of your work.
Yeah, moneywitch.com has, all the links to everything, including my money magic products. I make like some vibrational medicine to work with magic, and also my cult of financial healing, Money Coven. We're always welcoming folks. You can kind of hop in at any time and get taken on the spiral of it. I'm most heavy social media on Instagram at money.witch. And yeah, there's links from those
That's great.
places to everything
Perfect.
else.
And if you'd like to buy the book, which I highly recommend, Money Magic, you could buy it at modernmysticshop.com. And we actually have autographed copies. So if you want something even special, even more special, even though the book I read it on the Kindle and it was also excellent. Just another way to get some of her money magic into your hands. Well, thank you again. And thanks for everyone for joining this episode of MoonDay Mystic. If you're just joining us live, this will be posted on the podcast channel on Monday. All right.